Okay, so we're continuing our discussion of the parami. Parami being what we call the perfections, essentially compassionate external actions to help others, to be of assistance and service to others, and inevitably and importantly, having to put ourselves out, at times having to do the uncomfortable thing, um, working on behalf of others. It's not the totality of the path by any means, but it is important that if you do want to realize freedom from suffering, you have to reduce levels of self concern. And developing the parami helps tremendously in the recognition that the reduction in levels of self concern is actually a beautiful thing, that it yields beautiful states of mind. Sense, paradoxically enough, including a genuine sense of self worth. Somebody who has a genuine sense of self worth doesn't need to impose themselves upon others. Somebody with a feeling of self worth is able to sit quietly and close their eyes and meditate more successfully. So it's a very pragmatic and practical aspect of the Buddhist teaching whereby others are genuinely helped and also we help ourselves and yeah, enjoy happy resultants because we're behaving in skillful ways. So far in the series, we've looked at generosity, ethics, renunciation, wisdom, energy, and patience. Last week, we looked at energy and patience. And so I think one of the first things we can do is just review those two. And if anybody has any anecdotes, any interesting observations that they've come across in the last couple of weeks concerning the development of the parami and especially focusing on energy and patience, we can look at that, and then we'll move on to the next two, which is truthfulness and determination. And I think especially with truthfulness and determination, it'll be interesting to see how the development of these qualities in terms of compassionate activity are so useful when it comes to meditation as well. So just keep bearing in mind that what we're dealing with are the performance of external actions on behalf of others and in service of others. But also we can't forget that, yeah, we're doing it ultimately so that our mind is fit for the purpose of meditation as well. So firstly, is there anyone have any anecdotes or interesting observations about what they've come across over the last couple of weeks? We've got the react button at the bottom of the screen, which then you can use to wave at me, I think. And then I know that you want to have a chat. Lynn, hello.
Hello. Well, it isn't in the last couple of weeks, but I was just thinking about a few years ago, my dad would come out with a story, the same story about when I was a child, telling it to me and my husband. And so many times it was, did I ever tell you about such and such a time? And we'd heard it so many times. And it first of all, it gets on your nerves a bit and you think, yeah, I've heard it, like an eye rolling sort of time. And then at some point I noticed that it was lovely and he was always so, sparkle in his eye and laughing about it because and enjoying telling it. And it became Charlie and I would sort of look each other smiling, but in a warm way, that's him, and it was actually lovely then hearing him. So I suppose that the
That's patience.
patience, yeah,
That is the parami of patience. That is compassionate activity, because we fall into this trap of thinking it has to be larger than life, that you're having to make this grand statement, and it's not. It's about the little things. It's that willingness to put up with that painful feeling, that feeling of frustration, because here we are being told exactly the same story all over again. But what's the alternative? Because this is something that I don't know whether it came across a couple of weeks ago, but this idea, because I had an incident yesterday, because I had to go up to London and for service somebody else, and I was in London and I was in the wrong lane, and I dithered for like a nanosecond, and that was enough to get people beeping their horns at me. It was like, oh, great. And it's like the recognition that patience means, if people were practicing the parami around me, then I wouldn't have experienced that painful feeling of, people being annoyed with me. It would have been an act. It would have been, that is what the parami of patience is. It's a kind of negative doing good, in the sense that it's not noticeable because it's an absence rather than a doing. But that restraint is the performance of the parami of patience. Yeah. So your dad would not have been aware that actually you were practicing patience. That's the point. We'll come on to equanimity in a couple of weeks' time. Equanimity is about going, well, I don't need to have my act of generosity or act of my kindness, sort of reflected back to me. I don't need people to, even acknowledge it. And so with patience is one of those qualities that the fact that you're using it means nobody's going to notice. They're only going to notice you being impatient. So yeah, great. Thank you, Lynn. So there we are. There's patience. Anybody with any other reflections, anecdotes, anything they'd like to talk about from last time? If you remember, energy was an interesting one, because I think we got onto this whole question of what constitutes the balance of energy. You do have to expend energy, but how much? And I guess also it depends on your recognition that developing the parami is not the whole of the path, and that you have to be able to meditate, which means there has to be a limit on the parami. Had we discussed, I can't remember whether we had discussed what I like to talk about the Buddha, because when he was the Bodhisattva, and forgive me if we've already discussed this, but I think it's worth repeating. In his time as the Bodhisattva, he was developing the qualities that would enable him to, in his final lifetime, to be an historical Buddha, to be somebody who not only becomes enlightened, but rediscovers the path to enlightenment and is able to teach it effectively. So he was going to the absolute maximum in developing the parami. He was taking the parami as far as you possibly can. And there's the famous anecdote from the stories of his lives as a bodhisattva, where he gives up his life to enable a tigress, I think it was, to feed her young on his remains. And everyone thinks, well, not everyone thinks, but it is easy to assume that developing the parami is somehow taking everything to the absolute maximum in that way, the maximum amount of sacrifice. That's what it's about. But you'll note that in this lifetime, when he became Buddha, his instruction was not to take everything to the absolute maximum. His instruction was to develop the parami in a balanced way, but he also taught that external action can never resolve the problem of suffering, that the true cause of suffering is craving, which is an internal matter and can't be released through external actions. So he had discovered that there was indeed a limit to developing the parami, and that the perfection of the paramis is a balance, not an extreme. Because the cause of suffering is craving, which is an internal matter, and requires this introspection, this willingness to look at life from the inside out, of mindful noting, in order to understand transience, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. So his higher teaching, yeah, and that's, I think, a really important point to bear in mind, because people fall into this trap of idealizing the parami and believing that it is all about extremes, and it's not. It's about the little things, like Lynn mentioned. And because it's the little things, it's the sort of things that you find in your everyday life. You don't have to make a grand gesture. You don't have to go overseas and save everyone's lives. You can literally just attend to something which is unfolding. I'm sure there are occasions for all of us where we notice there is some way in which we can be of service to somebody else, even if it's doing, I don't know, a bit of tidying up around somebody's house who's incapacitated, or I don't know, whatever it might be. It's the little things. And I think it's really good and healthy to acknowledge that what you're doing is developing the parami, not in some self-absorbed, aren't I great way, but just the acknowledgement that, oh, here's an opportunity for me to practice generosity. Here's an opportunity for me to practice patience. Here's an opportunity for me to, go out of my way on somebody else's behalf. See what I mean? Does that make sense? Yeah. Any thoughts, considerations about that? Les, hello.
Hello there. I mean, that's also true, but it also, before that, there needs to be the mindfulness to be aware of the fact that you have got that opportunity.
Oh, yeah, very good point. So the path isn't developed sequentially. It's like you don't start with right view and then eventually you'll get to right mindfulness and right concentration. So if you think of the three trainings, so that's the training in ethics, which developing the parami is obviously a part of. You're also developing samadhi, concentration, and you're developing wisdom, both mundane wisdom and wisdom into ultimates, so supramundane wisdom. And if you think of them as like the three legs of a tripod, oh, there we are. That's a kind of tripodial. No, that's four-pull. You can't do it like that. That's ridiculous. How do I do it? I can't do it with my fingers. Doesn't matter. That was a fail. But you see what I mean? You've got the three legs of the tripod. They all rest on one another. So that same way, the three trainings all rest on one another. So if through the attempt, the wishing to be of service to others needs mindfulness to be developed in order to, yeah, that's it. Thank you, Liz. That's it. Needs mindfulness. It also needs the wisdom to appreciate the value of developing the parami. You need to know what the parami are. You need to know what all 10 are. And then be ready and willing to observe the opportunities when they arise. So in that way, not only do you need mindfulness in order to develop the parami, through the wish to develop the parami, which is coming from wisdom, you do develop the mindfulness in order to see those opportunities. So it's a very good point, Les. Yeah. Like, we're back to this whole tablecloth thing. If you start pulling at one edge of the tablecloth, everything starts coming with you. The entirety of the Buddha's teaching. That's why I say when we sit down to meditate, for instance, we are fulfilling all 8 steps of the Noble Eightfold Path. because they're not separate blocks, isolated blocks. They all form part of a whole. And that's what the Buddha's teaching is. It's a complete teaching. It's not missing anything. Annie, good evening. Oh, we need to unmute there.
Oh, good evening, Paul.
Hello.
I suppose what I'm going to say, because I don't know what I'm going to say, is ethics, really. So
Don't worry, I don't know what I'm going to say.
I just live off the hoof. But okay, I really have not developed a very basic thing, which is cooking from scratch. I would love to be able to do this. So for various reasons, it hasn't happened. And of course, I will always say, well, yes, I'll put money into the community. I put money into the cafes. I put money into restaurants. I'll put money here because I would say, I think, well, that's actually, you keep that money going into the community and everything. And I'm thinking, yeah, how are you ever going to learn this cooking from scratch? Because that is doing it for myself. Well, that's not this area. This isn't the area you're talking about, is it? You're talking about doing things for other people. But, I really want to do this, Paul. And no one's ever going to help me now. I'm like nearly 68,
You can't join an evening cooking class or something like that?
That wouldn't be of interest to join a cooking class.
Okay.
But the whole problem, I think, I'm going to have to try and say what the problem is. And it is being by myself, doing these, you would have to say, domestic things. One of the things, right, I'll just say it. When I was very young, my mother wasn't a role model for me. And I made up my mind I will never be wife because I will never live like this. And so what I did was I threw the baby out with the bathwater, really.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cleaning, cooking, all that stuff. I'm not doing that because I can't live like that. And so it was all very sort of far too extreme, But anyway, I don't know. I don't want to take up too much time. It's just that how can I just even, get on that small step and say, now today, I'm actually going to make a meal from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I can say it, but how can I justify, because it's always sort of, look, you've,
Well, you're going to have to change your mind, aren't you?
In what sense?
Well, in the sense that you created a rule.
Well, this is it. It's so deep-seated. It's not just a rule, though. You can see that it's not just a rule, Paul. It's also escaping that ghastly thing, which is being a practical person in this life and having to do these really uncomfortable things with your body. Whereas the mind was always what I thought, stay with the mind, you're all right with the mind, that's eternal. Don't go near the body, that dies, that's useless, don't go near the body. Just stay with the mind. And that's my problem. It's always been, I'm all right as long as I stay in the mind. And basically I just escaped, didn't I? My defense mechanism was don't escape your body,
Yeah. I mean, look, life is hard. Being a human being is hard. And I don't think there's a person who's on this Zoom meeting who hasn't been wounded or traumatized or in some way adversely affected by their upbringing, and that sets in a way that sets the agenda for life to come.
And I think this happened when I was very young, probably 2 or 3 or under 5,
Oh yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing how quickly that conditioning is set in. We spend a lifetime trying to work it all out.
Like, this household is just not okay. Just shut down, and just keep your eye on the ball,
Well, I think the first thing we do need to do, irrespective of who it is, irrespective of what that conditioning is, irrespective of how we've been wounded or affected, is just to accept that fact. And I think one of the key things is any kind of development of whatever kind has to begin from a place of acceptance, not resistance and rejection. And so it is accepting weirdly, this is paradoxical, but it is accepting your resistances, your own personal way of trying to resist. It is hard being a human being. And thank goodness it's not forever. We come here, if we take in the Buddha's long view of successive lifetimes, you can put it in the sense that we are here to learn lessons. And so our early childhood conditioning forms those lessons that we learn. And what is the real lesson? Is the real lesson is that I've somehow miraculously got to be different than I am? Or is the lesson learning to accept the conditions that I find myself in and have, and then work from that point of acceptance? So, like, the only thing that immediately comes to my mind, Annie, is like when I sat down to write my book, there was a lot of resistance to writing a book. I don't recommend it. However, because I told everyone, including my teacher, that I was going to write this book, I thought, well, I have to pull through, and we'll come on to this evening, because what we're looking at this evening is truthfulness and determination. So in terms of truthfulness, because I told everyone I was going to write a book, I had to write a book. And determination came in the fact that I would sit down in front of my laptop with absolutely no ideas whatsoever, and knowing real inclination to write. Mm-hmm. And so what I discovered was that initially I didn't have any ideas, but I would just start writing anyway. And so it was getting over the initial block, the initial resistance of saying, it doesn't matter about the quality of what I do. The only important thing is that I do it, that I start. And what I would find was that I would go through that initial resistance, and I'd have to push through with determination that initial resistance, and then I would get into the flow eventually. And like, I think it's important that when we act, we're not acting because we feel we should. That terrible S word, one of the worst S words, should. Whereas when we're actually doing something that we enjoy, that makes all the difference in the world. So I would say it's like, well, you're not doing anything wrong. You're just you, and we all have our funny ways, and you have yours and I have mine. Does the idea of being able to cook from basic ingredients, does that fill you with a kind of buzz? Does it oh, I'd really love to do that? And It's doing it from that place rather than the place, well, I should. If I was a reasonable human being, I would be able to do all of this. And I don't think that's the place to come from. I think the place to come from is simply that you would really like to do it, and that you're inclusive of and allow for that initial resistance. And they just go, well, I'm just going to start anyway. I'm just going to start with some relatively easy dishes, and I'll get I'll get the recipe and I'll get the ingredients together, and I don't mind how it comes out. This is another thing. It's like to remember that you're just practicing. Yeah, it doesn't have to come out absolutely perfect. It's just the joy of practice, enjoying the process of learning how to combine all these different ingredients and temperatures and stirrings and so forth. And it's just enjoying that process. So there'll be an initial resistance, but it's just pushing through that. Does that help, Annie?
Yes, I mean, I have to tell you, I do also suffer from obsessive compulsive disorder. Not surprisingly, but so I think simplicity is what I need to focus on, because I want to be able to live a simpler life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have all these pesticides.
Well,
additives and everything.
All right. Okay.
But also, I don't want to be, I'm spending too much money at the moment. So there's lots of reasons. And it is just sort of every day. It is the resistance, yes, because it is uncomfortable, very uncomfortable.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes.
You know, I mean, what gets me through the day is it's okay. You're going to the cafe for your lunch. That's your, you know, your structure, and then we'll go for a walk afterwards. And you know, but so I can do poached egg on toast. You know,
It's getting nicer. But it sounds like a lovely day.
there are a lot of advantages, as you know, Paul, to living on your own.
Oh, I've lived on my own for a very long time. I know, and it is difficult to motivate when you're by yourself.
Well,
Yeah.
a timetable. Yeah.
Yes. But maybe these are parts of the challenges that it's really good. But it's doing it enthusiastically and with love, and not feeling that there's some terrible pressure that you're supposed to conform to a pattern. That's the thing that you know, one of the things I've discovered is like, you know, it's doing it from a place of inner creativity and just wanting to enjoy that creative process, rather than feeling that you're somehow bound to try to conform to, you know, a pattern that is socially acceptable or anything like that.
No, I don't. Stir fry. I would really like to be able to do a stir fry. So maybe I should set myself a task for before the end of the year to get that wok down. And
yeah, well, if you got the wok, just get it down, give it a go. Get a recipe, get a few ingredients, slap it together.
thanks.
And I think, although you say, you know, obviously, you know, Parami are directed outward, we can't forget that we are human beings too, and, you know, self-compassion and all of that.
But
And
the great thing is, if I get to do the stir fry, I can invite my friend and cook it for them as well, can't I? So
cook it for yourself first. This is my make sure it tastes half decent, and the next time you do it, actually doing it with love, doing it with enjoyment, doing it with interest, rather than it being result focused. Allow it to be process focused, and that way, I did a lot of cooking during my full-time training, and I found that if I did it with confidence, if I did it with, you know, I wouldn't go for exact amounts. I'd, you know, sort of like, I'd eyeball it a little bit, and it was a bit freeform. They always tasted better for that somehow.
thanks very much.
Thank you. My mushroom soup goes down, I think, in the centre's history. Les, you had your hand up. It went away again. Did you want to? You had something you want to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say that Annie needs to not look at the big picture, but look at the small picture. Just one ingredient at a time. Just bring
That's what I mean by process.
2 together, and then when you got 2, bring 3 together.
Okay.
Or why go for a whole meal? Just go for like doing an egg, or doing, you know, boiling some rice or something like that. Just little things that you can then bring together. Put the egg and the rice together, and you might have egg fried rice if you're lucky.
Very good. I mean, this evening has taken the weirdest culinary turn, I must admit. But all good, all good. Excellent. I won't ask if anyone else has got any tips. No, leave it. All good. But yeah, I mean, it does kind of, it's interesting. It does, maybe it's just because it's on my mind, but it does bring us very neatly into these two qualities of, Ellen, please go for it.
Hi, good evening. Good afternoon over here. Annie's story makes me think of truthfulness. I know it's one of the ones we're going to get into here. And as you say, you make a commitment and you stick to it. You say, I'm going to sit down at 2 o'clock. You sit down at 2 o'clock. And as Annie is saying to herself, I'm going to make a stir fry. And I do this in many domains as well, where I've made a commitment to myself. And it's like, I will finish the yard work by Friday. And I chronically don't do it. And it feels terrible. It really does. So this, I mean, we've talked about the paramis being of service to others, but this one particularly for me hits home about keeping my own commitments. And I have never, the whole time I've known about it for the last 20 years, I've never gotten any better. Just saying, if you've got anything to say about that when we discuss truthfulness.
Well, absolutely. Your description of truthfulness as the parami is absolutely spot on. It is keeping your promises, even the promises to yourself. And it ties very neatly with determination, which is the next one. And I'm almost just going to repeat what you say. I mean, it is the determination to fulfill whatever it is that you've promised. And you do grow. I mean, this is the thing, is it's like you do grow as a person as a consequence of doing that. The way you perceive, let alone the way other people perceive you, the way you perceive yourself as a consequence of pulling through, of fulfilling whatever it was that had been dreamed up. Because remember, we are creating the world in a sense. We create the world as we go along. For instance, noticing these opportunities to be of service. But yeah, if you say either to yourself or to somebody else, I'm going to do that, then you do have, because otherwise you're creating a resistance, aren't you? And I know what it's like, the procrastination thing. Like I go back to the example of writing my book. It would have been so easy to fall into that very habitual behavior, but because I had and I think that's why I did it. I think that's why I said it explicitly, outwardly. I'm going to write this book from scratch. It forced my hand, because it's not you're not much of a spiritual teacher if you promise something and then you go, nah, can't be bothered. You got to pull through. So yeah. So you're asking, well, how do you go from that? How do you fulfill that?
Yeah, I mean, you've clarified, truthfulness, keeping one's own commitments, the same as external commitments. I just seem to be, very motivated when there's an external commitment.
Oh, okay.
Much less motivated by internal commitment. And my bent for just doing things. So I like making lots of commitments to myself because there can be lots of things to do. It's infinite.
And here we come back to this balance thing. So for people who create their entire lives around external action, somebody recently gave me I think there's been a study made. Sorry, I've got a cranky. Beg your pardon. There was a study, apparently 80% of people, what was it now? When confronted with the possibility of being in an empty room by themselves for 20 or 30 minutes, said that they would, I'm not sure I should say, I've just remembered what it was, but let's just say that they would choose other things above spending 20 to 30 minutes in a room by themselves. That people just cannot stand their own company. That they much prefer external activities to take up their entire days, because they don't have to be alone with reality. Whereas we, at the House of Inner Tranquility, we thoroughly approve of people spending 20 to 30 minutes alone in there and encourage them to do it for hours on end. And I have to say, it's my favorite thing. Whether there are other people in the room with me or whether I'm just by myself, I absolutely love calming the mind, getting concentrated, and just being with reality. There is only reality. But that's because I've undertaken a course of training in meditation and developing the parami and ethics and so forth, which allows me to. So I'm not surprised that people fill their lives with endless external activities. And to my mind, it feels like such a shame because you're missing out tremendously. And so, Ellen, you're saying that you find it easier to fulfill those promises externally, but you treat yourself differently.
Yep.
So you regard yourself as a different species of human.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Yep.
So perhaps, again, I mean, it's like, well, is it, I'm sorry, I don't want to turn this into a personal meditation interview, but is it the case that those personal things, are they absolutely necessary things? Or are they just, because where does, say, meditation fit?
Right. Yeah. No, they're not always necessary, but often they're, hobby things like, what about playing with my photos, or and meditation, of course, as of late, I've been able to keep that promise to myself much better than I have in the past while.
It does depend on life
But yeah,
circumstances. Yeah.
it does. But I think what you and I've talked about before is it is about being mindful and about noticing if I'm just not getting to the yard work, noticing that I'm not getting to the yard work, and then trying to be mindful of that and go ahead and, just as you say, get over the hump and get started. And it'd feel completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
And maybe again, maybe it's making fewer agreements externally.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that too. Yeah. Thank you. Somebody else.
Okay. Thanks, Ellen. Hilda.
Yeah, I recognize so much there. I do love a good to-do list, but I find it interesting then with determination how it kind of waxes and wanes. Like sometimes today was just powering, well, no, actually today wasn't maybe not that great. For getting things done, but other days it's like bam, 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 bam. And it's just interesting to see sometimes the determination to just get on with things and not procrastinate. It's much easier. And same thing with the meditation. If you're in I guess better place maybe with the meditation, or maybe that's just me, it's easier and it feels easier, and then it's easy to maybe stop for a while, and then it's really hard to get back into it. Perhaps I'm not the only one, but yeah, it's just interesting.
But if you make that commitment, that you see, because it does cross over, that truthfulness of saying, yeah, I'm going to meditate every day for a minimum of 30 minutes is kind of non-negotiable. Yeah. If you want to realize freedom from suffering, then there has to be that willingness to sit every day, irrespective of what comes up. And the problem is, of course, we're dealing with reality, not spiritual fantasy. And so what comes up can be loneliness or fear or feeling trapped, or it could be all kinds of things. And there has to be that willingness to persist and to be determined in fulfilling that promise that one makes to oneself, irrespective of fulfilling, the criteria required by the House of Inner Tranquility. I mean, it's a personal promise to oneself. We can't leave a meditation halfway through. You're creating bad habits through that, because it means whatever it was that came up, we didn't want to look at it. And so we have to be willing to sit there. So if it's half an hour, that's the truthfulness. I'm going to sit for half an hour, and then it's the determination to sit for half an hour. Also, the other way around, which is you stop at half an hour, irrespective of the fact that you've just gone into a really blissful, deep state of concentration. the alarm goes, and you say, right, okay, well, that's it. Now I get up, and now I go off and do something else on my to-do list.
Mm.
Yeah, it's so important. It is transferable. The parami, developing the parami, are developing the qualities you need for meditation. Absolutely, it's a complete teaching.
Yeah.
There was another aspect to that as well. It's gone for now, Hilda. Maybe it will come back to me. Is that okay? Is that everything that?
Yeah, I was just thinking that like if it becomes like too much of a like just another thing on the to-do list, I don't know if I should like center it more, that the meditation is like, okay, this is like the most, like this is today's goal, once this is done.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I do see what you mean. There are times, undoubtedly, when, with the best will in the world, it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough to get through, and you are kind of doing it because you're doing it. And there are times when it feels like you're doing it by rote. It doesn't feel authentic, whatever. It's not always like that, though. There are patterns, and it's learning to include those patterns within the context of the meditation. So you're feeling bored, or you're feeling listless, or you don't really feel like it, or it's hard to pay attention to things. And it's noting those patterns and including those patterns as well, rather than thinking, well, I won't meditate today because I'm not really feeling like it. Now, and when it comes to the to-do list, I mean, speaking personally, what should come higher than meditation every day? But that's me. And everyone has to prioritize, and perhaps we have to balance, therefore, the amount of external activity and how much we have on our to-do list. Because, I mean, the other thing about meditation is, and mindfulness, you can apply yourself to mindful noting when you're doing other tasks. It's not an exclusive dichotomy. We're looking for integration of mindfulness into everything that we do. But I guess it's all a question of balance, really. I don't know what other people think about that. Have we covered it, Hilda, do you think? You have, yeah, okay. Birgit, good evening. Nice to see you.
Good evening. I just really like that idea of the tablecloth with the parami, because like I've been struggling so much with feeling that I have to force myself to be generous, and that doesn't feel right and doesn't change. And just during the time today, it just occurred to me that there's a different angle to that if determination maybe doesn't work, then maybe you can look at the more wisdom bit and just think like, okay, I'm not going to aim to be as generous as possible in order to, I don't know, make myself be an acceptable kind person, but I might aim to be generous because I want to see how that feels like and what the consequences of that is. And that sort of then just puts that in a context of sort of one action at a time rather than that sort of big goal that is never achievable. I just really like that.
Yes, absolutely, because that big goal, which is not achievable, is actually a projected fantasy.
Yeah.
Because we are only actually dealing with what's unfolding in our experience now. And the whole ethos of the Buddha's teaching is to find out from your own direct experience. I mean, it's fundamental. It's what the Buddha said to the Kalamas of Kesaputta. Don't worry about what anyone says. Find out from your own experience. Put it into practice. Now, if that means that even if it doesn't feel authentic, and it's like there's a kind of, like a more detached sort of like, well, I'll put this into practice. So coming from the wisdom angle, of recognizing that actions have results, and saying, well, okay, well, I'm going to give in order to find out what kind of comes back my way. I think that's a perfectly valid introduction. And you're absolutely right. The others come along for the ride. Yeah.
Yeah, just really like that.
Yeah. Great. Excellent. So are we getting to grips with these two parami? Do we understand the implications? Because what is the implication of saying yes to somebody and then not pulling through and not keeping the promise? What does that do to our own sense of the world around us and other people's sense about us? Like coming on retreat. Like if you put your name down to come on retreat, come on retreat. Don't send us an email a few days before saying, oh, I'm sorry, I can't make it. Get on the retreat. You promised. Especially now, because places are limited. And if you put your name down and you don't come, it means somebody else definitely missed out. So, you know, it's not good. It's really not good. So what is good is to say, I've promised to get on the retreat. I don't feel like going. I don't feel like spending a week looking at stuff. It's hard. Yeah, we know. That's where the determination comes in to fulfill that promise. Yeah. Because what happens if we don't fulfill it? People look at us and think we're flaky. And they may be less inclined to be of assistance to us in the future as a result. Or they might be a little bit distrustful of what we have to say or what we offer in the future. People will look at us a little more askance. Is that a word? Did I just say a word? Askance? Askance? I'm getting a few nods. So it's really important that having offered, that we pull through. And then as a consequence of pulling through, we get a taste for it because it feels really nice. And it makes it easier to say yes and to pull through subsequent to that. So Ellen, back for some more.
Again, just a straight up question.
Mm-hmm.
Does truthfulness also have a component of meaning what you say and not lying? Or is that more the, precept?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's covered in the precepts, isn't it? But
right.
there is the implication that you haven't been entirely honest and straightforward if you don't fulfill your promise. So
oh, I see. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Does anyone any other thoughts about observations, or can be about any of the parami? Lynn or
Yeah, I was just thinking, following through on commitments and keeping promises, it's energizing, and if you don't, you can just, it's a downer, you just feel bad and you lose energy.
yeah, it's a burden, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's boosting if you do. If it was something you didn't want to follow through on, it does boost. That was all.
Yes, no, that's a very good point. That because we are ultimately looking, because to renege on a promise is to raise levels of self-concern, isn't it? The resistance is self-concern in action. Whereas when you pull through, so essentially you surrender something of yourself, your energy, your time, the determination to pull through, you end up feeling better than when you started. So absolutely, it leads to a lightness of being. Okay, Giuseppe.
Hi, Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like what's being said, and obviously, the truthfulness and determination. Well, when Birgit mentioned seeing it from different aspects, like wisdom aspect and all of that, I can definitely say at the moment I'm having sort of another realization. I say yes to so many things. So I'm saying yes a lot, but in my mind I'm thinking no. And I keep falling down this same thing. So, but this is like friends who want to do stuff like that I don't actually want to do, and I'm saying yes to. I know it's stupid. It's like one of these.
We all know.
And I'm there, yeah, and I'm sort of inside collapsing, saying, why am I saying yes right now? I want to say no. I want to say no.
Okay. Yeah, but saying no comes at a cost, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Social cost.
Yes.
You might put somebody else's plans out of, and this is why we have to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is honesty. Mindfulness is about noting what is actually there. And yes, we there's all this inner conflict between what we really want to do and what we think is the socially appropriate thing to do.
Yes.
But actually, is it? Because if you keep saying yes and nobody hears you say no, they'll just keep asking.
Yeah.
There comes a point where we have to know when to say no.
Yeah.
So first thing to do is you've got to get in tune with what your real feelings are.
It is a complete fear of
yeah, it's not always obvious, because sometimes you want to say no, but really the maybe the compassionate thing to do is to say yes in certain situations. But if it's just like a social occasion or something, then you're within your right to say no to people. But saying to people, it's this whole sort of like the personality traits, and agreeableness is one of the personality traits, and it's a frequency range between agreeableness and disagreeableness. And some of the most successful people are actually disagreeable, meaning they don't mind saying things which put other people's noses out of joint. Or they don't mind the painful feelings that come with not going along with. So you strike me as an agreeable person.
I do my best.
It's like, yeah, absolutely. But in terms of the frequency range between disagreeable and agreeable, I think you're,
I'm really good at agreeable, but on the inside, I'm like, no, no. But also,
okay. So inner honesty first and foremost. Get straightened out within yourself.
Yeah.
and then make a decision. And sometimes that decision will be to go with, and other times it'll be not on this occasion. Thank you, sir.
I'm definitely getting better at this, because this has been coming up specific as a thing for me. But just to say, from this whole thing that we've been talking about, see, a decision that I made a little while ago to do something which I didn't want to do, and at the time I said yes to, and I have repeatedly said yes to, I now can actually use that as a little bit of a lesson of determination to see it through, to put it to bed, and then I will move on, hopefully a little bit stronger, and in the future maybe say no.
That's it. That's part of the parami. It's like it's not like we just instantly walk out there and we're like the bodhisattva and we're just always making the right decision. It's like learning from experience. Learning from experience is that sometimes I have to say no, and it's okay. And it's okay to experience the painful feeling, and it's okay to experience this projected perception of having done the socially wrong thing. It's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you've learned that, from experience, that always saying yes doesn't work. and you're now prepared to experiment with perhaps saying no on occasion. But when you do say yes, you've got to pull through. Yeah. Lucy and Lynn. Lucy this time.
Hi, Paul. I was just thinking what Giuseppe was saying about saying yes to social things with friends that you don't want to go to, which I'm really good at. And it kind of, maybe it only works because in my group of friends, we all like, it's a good group of friends. There's nothing kind of where I secretly actually don't like them and don't want to hang out, but they kind of have gotten to know that I will say no sometimes when I don't want to, and it will be something like, "Oh, I just want to go to bed instead," or something kind of that doesn't sound like the better option, but it is a great other option. And I remember one time when I said a no, and it was, "Oh, I just want to do nothing else, just be alone." One of them turned to me and said, he said, "Teach me." He was like, how can you say how are you so good at just being able to say no? But I mean, maybe I'd have to play it differently in a group of people who I'm not so friendly with, but they just kind of got to know that's kind of my thing, and sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. And I think a lot more people actually feel like saying no to social things but say yes than we all kind of are aware of.
So you're more willing to be disagreeable.
Yeah, definitely, but in a
yeah,
more
but yeah,
way.
would you say your friends have a better sense of you and your honesty than say if it was somebody that would just always say yes even when they do? Because
Yeah.
if you're saying yes and you don't really mean it and you go, you can't be down in the dumps, and
No.
you've got to be part of it and enthusiastic and want to do it.
Yeah.
So at least they know where they stand.
Yeah, and I say to them, if I'm coming, I make sure I bring my A game, not my B game, because
Wow.
that's fun for anyone. If I say yes, don't want to go, and then I bring my B game. But then
Yeah.
there was a time relatively recently where I said yes because it was a new job situation, and although I really didn't want to go out on a night out, it was my colleagues were going out, so I found myself out at kind of 1 a.m. or something in Manchester, and I kind of realized if I'm going to commit to this and I'm going to come home when they come home at whatever time in the morning, and obviously not be drinking, and they're all drunk, and I thought I have to bring, I can't do this and half-hearted. I have to be really up for this night out that I really actually don't want to go, because I'd kind of made the decision, right, I can either go to bed now or I can kind of go on this night out, which I don't want to do, but this is for being new job.
Oh, yeah.
So I brought my A game.
Yeah.
Didn't want to do it, but
No,
yeah,
that's the right
I
thing to
thought
do.
I can do that once and that's it. I've done my joining a new job thing, and I can
Yes.
always go to bed next time.
It's almost like an initiation. In
Yeah,
a new job, you've got to say yes. You've
Yeah.
got to be part of that crowd. You can't afford to alienate yourself from the very beginning. I'm just speaking from personal experience, right? Because I've made that mistake, and it literally puts you, it already highlights you as somebody who's not a part of the group.
yeah.
Which in a sense was me actually being honest, because I wasn't into it at all. So yeah, but a very, very good point. Like, yeah, you commit to it. Sometimes circumstances are you got to think about your own future you as well, and fitting into that group over a long protracted period of time. And so yeah. And there's a thing that like you kind of you're reluctant, but you think, well, I've got to just drop it all and just go out and enjoy myself. And you end up enjoying yourself, irrespective.
It was quite fun, but yeah, it's not me. It's not what I would do by choice, kind of. So
Yeah, Manchester 1 o'clock in the morning is not kind
yeah,
of me either.
it's not me. It's not me. And there was just loads of 18-year-olds out, and just I've got my water, and I'm not having a good time. But I kind of made myself have a good time because I thought I have to. But another thing I was thinking of is because honesty is probably my favorite parami. And the thing about following through with your commitments is something I've really kind of taken to heart for a long time. And I was thinking, what does it give me? Well, it makes
I like to be seen as reliable, and I really like people to think 99% of the time, because sometimes things do happen, that if I say something, that will definitely be the case. I'll definitely be there. I'll definitely do the thing. But then I was thinking how it makes, there's one exception to that, which is with people who are not reliable. If they say, oh, you know, there are a couple of people in my life who will say that they'll make plans with you, and I kind of take those plans very loosely, because they never really follow through. So if a better offer comes up for me during the time when I agreed, yes, I'll see you, I will happily take that better offer, because I know these people aren't going to follow through anyway, pretty much. Or if they do, their words don't really mean anything. I don't really believe them when they say, yes, we'll meet you at this time. It's kind of, yeah, maybe you will. We'll see close. I'll check in with you an hour before, kind of. Yeah, so it kind of makes me that's the one case where I won't, if you like, well, I would follow through if they followed through, kind of thing. But I take it very lightly, like, yeah, in theory, I agree to meet you at this particular time or place or whatever, but I don't actually believe it that much. I won't, you know, I will happily drop that plan if something better comes up.
It's interesting, isn't it? So their wavering has established for you a perception of them, and then you are reacting and responding to that. Yeah, I'm just making a note to self: always tell Lucy the truth. Pain of, yeah. Absolutely, and that just illustrates the point I was trying to make beautifully. That the people that waver and unreliable in that way, they just, you know, they will be deemed, they will be perceived like that. Excellent. Right, we've been going an hour, so I'm done. There, I told you, I was honest. I'm trying to learn to stop talking, so I'm going to stop talking. So, a couple of weeks. Let's see if we can get more examples of Parami in action. Let's see what you can do over the next couple of weeks in just observing and noting and being mindful of those opportunities. And they don't have to be grand gestures, like I say. It could just be listening to somebody or just being patient with someone. There are so many ways of acting compassionately in the world, and it will help your meditations. It will definitely help your meditations. Okay, enough for this evening.
Thank you.
Yes,
In a
thank you,
couple of
Paul.
weeks.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Paul.
Paul. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Paul.
Bye.
Bye.